Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I am David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. And with me is Ken Watanabe Shihan and Bill D'Angelo. So what should we talk about today, Bill?
So I think the teed up topic is the importance of proper ukemi in Aikido practice.
Oh, proper ukemi. I don't know, is proper ukemi necessary?
I think proper ukemi is essential for good Aikido.
Well, maybe for some of our listeners, most of our listeners are probably Aikidoists, but for those that aren't, should we maybe throw out the senior teacher's definitions of what ukemi is so that we kind of have a place to start?
Yeah, so what is ukemi?
Well, if you break down the word, uke means to receive, and mi is the body. So ukemi is literally receiving body. In this case, they're the body that receives the technique.
Is ukemi only in Aikido?
The word uke is used in a lot of martial arts. Like in swordsmanship, they say uketachi, which means the one who receives the sword. So the uke word is very common. So yes, the person who receives the technique, like there's a winner and a loser, quote in quotes.
But I think in Aikido training, the role of the uke is clearly defined and codified. But is it clearly defined and codified in other martial arts?
I would say, yeah. Like there's clearly somebody who attacks, and then the person doing a technique has to negotiate the attack and dispatch, or like if you look at the demonstration, they win.
So, Sensei, are you getting at the idea that ukemi is consistent across multiple martial arts when you're doing kata? Because if it's a non-kata scenario, you don't know who the person is that's going to win or lose. But in a kata, like a prearranged practice, ukemi takes on a very certain role.
Well, I mean, all martial arts are contrived.
Right.
So that being contrived, then you have to define each role and give each role what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
But I don't know if in maybe karate or in judo, they say the person receiving the technique, the uke, does this. Like it's all predefined. Maybe you happen to get them into this position and then you do the techniques on them, not with them. But in other martial arts, you're doing the techniques to them, not with them.
In a way, yes. In other martial arts, in a demonstration, let's say judo or kendo, the senior person is the uke. He's the one that receives the technique. And the reason why is because the teacher is the one that can control the timing, and he knows where to be in the correct position to make the technique look correct and work, etc., etc. So usually the junior person is the one who throws or cuts, and the senior person is the one who gets thrown or is, quote unquote, cut down.
But like in Greek wrestling and that type of stuff, do they define the role of the uke?
Well, I would think that without specific terms, it comes down to demonstration. So if you're in a situation where the teacher or senior student's demonstrating how to do a proper technique, like an arm drag or something, like there's a person doing the arm drag and there's a person who's having their arm dragged. But I think that structure is based very much on the instruction. And I think maybe what you're getting at is it's not just instruction, but it's actually part of the practice itself. One aspect that I do think probably goes across multiple martial arts is that there's an element of self-protection that needs to be learned in ukemi. And whether you call it ukemi or you don't, any martial art, especially grappling martial arts, people need to know how to safely receive a technique. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but but I don't know if other martial arts other than Aikido really defines the step-by-step thing that the uke is supposed to be doing when you receive the technique. Foot here, arm there, body falls like this, right? Most of them define the attack,
Right.
and then they define the end part of it. But in between, it's kind of like all these things happen. You laid there or you stood there, and I did all these things to you, right? Like karate, the person punches, and then you do all these strikes, and the person's just standing there.
Yeah.
Right? They don't really talk about, this is what you should be thinking. This is what you should be doing. In judo, the same thing. You grab a certain way, they do the technique a certain way, but they don't
Right.
say, here's the things that happen in between. In Aikido, you're talking about your foot should be here, your back leg is like this, your torso is upright, your head is tilted or whatever it is. But I mean, do you think that in other, like in Kendo, I don't recall them saying, this is how you receive the strike. You struck at them, they struck you. That's it.
I don't know much about the kendo kata, but most kata, as contrived as they are, there's always a way for either side to win. But for the sake of organizing the idea behind the technique, there's always a winner and there's always a loser. But there's always variations from that one movement. I don't know if that makes sense. I might be going off in my little tangent right now.
But in terms of Aikido Ukemi, in Aikido technique, is there a winner and a loser, like in that sense?
When you look, like when I first started taking Aikido and you get thrown around, they're like, oh, you're just their punching bag. And you're like, I'm not their punching bag. And then for a long time, you're like, am I their punching bag? I'm always getting thrown down, but I throw the other person down. So it feels like when you get thrown down, you lose. When you throw someone, I won. You know, there's this sense of I beat you, you beat me. I could throw you down, but you can't throw me down.
But in the true spirit of Ukemi, it's not supposed to be like that.
It's not supposed to be like that. As I trained, I was like, oh, it's not supposed to be like that.
But so then that brings us back to this idea of it being essential. Is Ukemi essential to learning Aikido?
Yes.
In what way?
Ukemi teaches you tons of different things about Aikido. It teaches you how to keep, first of all, it's like the basis of how to defend yourself.
What do you mean by that, Ken?
It means, number one, you have to make a good attack. But when the person twists your arm, brings you around, you have to be able to keep the connection with the other person, position yourself so they can't do more damage to you. So basically, when you take Ukemi, you're minimizing damage to yourself so they can only do one or two things to you. Basically, just either do Ikkyo or do Iriminage. They can just clock you and then do Iriminage. So you always position yourself in a place where they can only do one or two things to you. So in a way, even though you're being the loser, you're still controlling the technique in a way, just by positioning and how you move around.
Is it a prerequisite to doing the Ukemi to have like the basic body movement, Tai Sabaki, be instructed first? It sounds like it's an element of what both of you are talking about.
I mean, if you want to make the class faster, you want to make the students stronger, you improve the Ukemi.
Yes.
But I mean, what you're saying is that as the uke, you're placing yourself in the position to take the technique, but you are controlling what technique is going to be done.
In a way, yes. But let's say you're doing, let's say, Shomenuchi Kotegaishi. The nage will move you in a specific way, but as a uke, I want to move in a way that's not going to escalate the situation, and also put myself in a way that if he throws me super duper hard, I'll be in a position to just fall down rather than have my arm like wrenched if I'm out of position. Like, you know, like if you're too far away, they can just take your arm and just twist it and just throw it rather than just throw you down straight down. And that's dependent on how I receive the technique.
But doesn't that doesn't that make people think that Aikido's fake?
Like you said, like all martial arts is contrived. Well, martial arts training is contrived.
Right.
Because they're trying to set up certain habits in your body and your mind, so you automatically do these things to minimize damage to yourself. So instead of being in a place where they can hit me or kick me, they can only do ikkyo on me. So I'm doing like the lesser of 10 evils, So breaking my arm, then they do ikkyo on me. So kicking my face, I slide in and then get close to them so they can only do ikkyo on me. So, but then that's like, it's almost like, even though like when Sensei used to throw me, I felt like I was constantly trying to catch up to him, which that's what I learned the technique should feel like. But I'm constantly putting myself in a position so I don't get like a hand coming out of nowhere slapping my face. I'm always in a very safe place. Yeah.
I mean, but in Greek and Roman martial arts, do they think about it in that sense?
I mean, to the extent that I had experience with it, and then later from an academic perspective, I think that there are elements when you have a technique done on you, whether it's a wrestling technique or a boxing technique, like you need to learn the technique. And so you learn it from both sides. You learn it as the nage, you learn it as the uke. In wrestling, if you don't know how to receive a technique safely, you can't counter. So, but it can get specific. So like in Western wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, like being pinned on your back is an automatic end to the match. So you'll learn techniques that prevent you when someone's doing a throw on you, how to counter and not land in a way that you lose the match right away. So I think that there are, in some martial arts, Western martial arts, the counter and the ukemi can be taught at the same time. But before you get to that level, you still need to be able to land in a way that you're not destroyed. So if someone does a shoulder throw on you or a hip toss, you still need to be able to receive it to learn.
But in Japanese martial arts, do they teach the counters?
As I would think like after a certain amount of training, a certain expertise, then you either the counters start appearing to you, or someone will say, hey, when they do this, do this. Or when they mess up here, this is what you can do. So a lot of times ukemi is you're going with it. And for me, it's like if you're thrown by someone who's skillful, you'll be like, okay, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. About this time, I'm going to be thrown. And then when you're thrown by someone who's not as good, you're like, this is going to happen, and this didn't happen. So I'm going to do this to this person. Like they didn't check off all the boxes to make the technique effective. Then you just take the empty box and go, I'm going to just go kick him or hit him.
Sensei, what do you think is the most efficient way to teach ukemi? Because I think a lot of people, when they start Aikido or Judo or whatever, like they're like, oh, I want to do ikkyo, or I want to do a shoulder throw, but you can't get to that level without teaching ukemi. So how does the curriculum work for teaching ukemi, specifically in Aikido?
Well, that's that thing that they say the best Aikidoists were.
Yeah, the best Aikidoists are the best ukes. If your ukemi is very good, then for sure your Aikido is going to be good.
But in the old days, it was all trial and error.
Right, you just survived.
A person threw you. They didn't say, this is how you should fall. This is how you should sit down. They just threw you.
And you fell.
And then they kept throwing you until your body became more efficient, and then you started falling correctly. Because in the old way, you only beat it into them.
Right, but that's not how it's taught usually today, right?
I'm sure that back in the old days when Aikido was secret, and you could only join if you're like a high level martial artist or you had some kind of letter of recommendation. Back then, whatever martial art you did, kendo, judo, whatever, everybody kind of knew how to fall. Everybody had a little bit of grappling. So back then, like martial arts was, I believe it's not so specialized. So when O-sensei threw you, if you're a kendo person, you already knew how to take a fall, you know. And probably the way O-sensei threw you was so correct that you fell safely in spite of yourself, rather than, you know, just taking someone, just lifting them over your head, and just throwing them down. Like when O-sensei threw you, it was probably so expertly done that you fell correctly in spite of yourself. Like that's how much control he probably had back then. And, you know, judo, kendo, karate, all those guys knew how to take a fall. But when you're just like Joe Blow off the street with no, like for me, someone had to actually teach me how to take a roll.
Yeah, because I mean, in the old days, sumo was a compulsory.
Yeah.
In like garden school and high school?
all those in those early years. And so by doing sumo, you learned how to push, you learned how to fall and roll, you learned all these different things. But today's martial artist comes in with no martial or violence experience.
Yeah.
But Sensei, that might not be a bad thing if Aikido has the ability to teach ground up.
Well, that's what we come back to your question is that, you know, like, how do you teach people today? The only way to teach people proper ukemi is to know the proper ukemi that was taught to you.
Right.
Yes.
You know, if you just go, well, I just kind of roll.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
I just kind of do it. I don't know, when you kind of just do like any of those, I just kind of wing it. That's how people are going to get hurt.
Right.
You know, and knock on wood, at least at our dojo, no one's ever gotten seriously injured, broken their neck, but it could happen because you're teaching, you know, the popular thing today is to teach breakfall. And breakfall, when we were students, it was a shodan level thing. Like if you were almost shodan or almost black belt, then you were expected to know how to take a breakfall.
Right.
But today you're like white belt, yellow belt, let's do some breakfall, which is super dangerous.
Yeah. And then wouldn't you say, I mean, a breakfall, as spectacular as it looks, wouldn't you say a breakfall is contrived?
It's completely fake.
Completely fake. It's a demonstration technique.
Right.
And maybe it's good for training. It's a training method. But from my experience, you throw someone down with Aikido, they're just going to fall down, you know.
Yeah, like I remember one of our students was a judo guy in Taekwondo, and he was playing pickup basketball, and him and this guy got into an argument. The guy rushed him. He did seo nage, the judo throw over the shoulder. Blam! The guy hits the ground. He's thinking, I got him. The guy stands up, and it's game on. And
he was
like,
mad.
Oh no, right? Like, so, you know, like ukemi breakfall was designed to save you. If they could take a break fall, then they're safe.
Yeah.
And that's why in the old days there was a lot of throws where that wouldn't allow you to take a break fall. Like juji nage, you don't let go of the arms.
You just drill them into the floor.
Yeah, you drill their head right into the ground. The game is over.
Game is over. They're not going to get up anymore.
Yeah. Remember in the old days, they neutralized the attack, they locked the joint, they broke the joint, and then they killed you.
Would you say, like, I just thought this right now, like a breakfall is a contrived movement, but I just thought, like, would a breakfall enable the nage to just go full force, and then the person can fall in a safe, you know, it's equivalent of a live fire exercise.
Was the intention of breakfall.
Okay.
Is so that you could throw this person as hard as you wanted to, and then they could fall out of it.
Fall safely. And then they can attack you again.
Right.
And then in that way, like, actually breakfall is good because it makes your body tough.
Yes.
It makes you strong, you know.
On a certain level, that's what makes your body, I don't know, tough. Because it's your hips slam into the ground, your shoulder slams into the ground, and then your body becomes hardened. But what happens is if you don't know how to break fall well, that's how you mess up your shoulder.
Yeah.
That's how you mess up your neck.
That's how you cut your Aikido career short.
I went to this well-known dojo on the East Coast once.
Yeah.
And in the dressing room, I noticed every person was wrapping their knees, elbows, and ankles.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
And I was like, wow. And then I heard people talk about, oh, yeah, I just had a knee surgery. This is my first day back. And then that person's wrapping their ankle with an ankle brace and their elbows. And I thought, don't these people know how to fall properly? Because, I mean, but that's the thing. The concussive forces from smashing this guy's hip on the ground. They have to wrap their ankles. They got to wrap their knees. They got to wrap their elbows.
Yeah, they're like falling incorrectly.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that, Sensei? You're saying like even if you do break fall, you may still get injured. Is break fall in your perspective evolved so that it's a safer practice now?
It's a safer practice, but you have to be athletically inclined in order to break fall well.
Yeah.
If you can't, Ukemi is supposed to teach you things like kinesthetic awareness, right? How your body moves. Proprioception, how your body moves in space. If you can control that, you can take this really great soft break fall. But if you can't control your body, if you can't roll well, you have no business doing break fall.
Yeah. You have to know how to take really good forward ukemi, the kind of ukemi that's light, quiet. You fall, boop, and you just stand up real fast. Because basically, whatever ukemi you do is all about movement. You have to be moving when you hit the ground. Because if you hit the ground static, that's like the equivalent of a belly flop.
Yeah. And that's the old school judo style.
Yeah, old school judo. It just plopped you down. It wasn't like what did Sensei say? He said, most people can take damage in one little spot. Their brain can handle damage here, but when you have multiple points of concussive force, your body gets totally your nervous system gets totally overwhelmed, like a belly flop. So he said, Aikido people and Judo people, when you hit them, nothing. A regular person, they can't even take this little damage to this one spot. But Aikido people, they're used to having their whole body hitting the floor.
Oh, so that's a kind of interesting point then. This idea of rolling forward or backward, break fall forward, or, creates this toughness to your body that if someone were to punch you in the stomach or in the chest, your body already knows how to disperse
how to dissipate the energy. So in a way, break fall, as contrived as it is still essential. But that is not the way. If I was going to throw kotegaishi on somebody, I would not allow him to break fall. I would just drill him into the floor.
Yeah, you try to knock the air out.
Him or her.
Try to knock the air out of them.
No, yeah.
But, when you do the running and jumping roll, you jump over people, would you say that that's the best precursor for break fall? Because if you can do that, that means you know how to bring your center of gravity over.
I would say that's a good training tool. Number one, it takes the fear out of you because you have the confidence to know that even running, jumping over 6, 7, 8 people, I can still fall safely. Your skill, that's your skill is your safety net.
So if you're a first time Aikidoist listener to our podcast and we hear everything that we're talking about, what is a beginning student likely to experience their first couple classes? Will they do Ukemi? Will they not do Ukemi?
In today's Aikido, we in our dojo, we do not teach rolling in that first week, couple weeks, month. Because the thing is that most people today sit too much. So their necks and their low backs are too tight
to do it.
So you got to ease them into it. And then when they finally roll, they don't wrench their neck.
Yeah.
And then they quit.
And actually, my experience, just a little bit of ukemi, most people's bodies aren't used to that kind of movement. A lot of people say, I can't get out of bed the next day. And you're but all you did was just some backward roll and come forward, up, then stand. It was almost to us, because we're used to it, we're conditioned, it's nothing. But we forget how hard even simple Aikido movements are physically on your body if you're not conditioned. Yeah.
Yeah, there was this one time we had this across the driveway, there was a bunch of guys living there, making sculptures and whatnot. And one of the guys came over to learn Aikido. And on the first day, he could do half backward roll stand up.
Wow.
So I just threw him a whole bunch of times because he could take it. And he was in his 20s. He was really athletic. He could take it. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. I thought that I was showing him that he could do it, and, inspiring him.
You're showing him the way.
He never came back. And then he saw one of the students a couple months later, and the guy said, "Hey, how come you never came back?" He's like, "The teacher tried to kill me. I couldn't even wake up the next day. My body was so sore."
Yeah, and that's from the Ukemi.
And that's just half backward roll, not full backward roll.
And I'm almost positive you were not throwing him that hard.
No.
You were just going what we consider as you're just doing the movement. Just enough to unbalance him and throw him down. But for most people, that's way too much. They are not conditioned.
Yeah, and he said he couldn't get out of the bed the next morning.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, I think, Ukemi, like if you think of a vigorous regular class, like you might get thrown and have to get up 100 times in an hour.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah.
if you were to go to the gym, like I think of like a similar thing, it's kind of like getting down and up is like a burpee. You do 100 burpees, or like, crap, I'm completely gassed. And then you transfer it to like, you have to learn to be efficient too in Aikido, so that, as you're saying, this first day he was able to do some of the rolling, maybe didn't realize how to receive the force, how to translate it.
You don't know how strong Aikido makes you. You have no idea because you always feel that you're not like winning. But yeah, and when you take the Ukemi, Ukemi is like strength training, preliminary strength training for Aikido, I think. Straight training, movement training, connection training, learning how to read like your opponent's movement, just by grabbing and trying to follow him. Yeah.
When you say connection, again, I always try to think of like people that are maybe not Aikidoists listening to us, or they're very beginners. What do both of you mean by connection in Ukemi when a technique is being done? Like, what is that? How does that relate to Ukemi?
Well, most people think connection is just grabbing the wrist
and not losing the hold.
Not losing your grip, but that's not the point.
No, that's the very, very tip of the iceberg. That's just, Ukemi is almost all your feet. Like when you're trying to keep the connection, you can't just be static when you're grabbing like your opponent's like wrist or, any body part, shoulder. You have to use your feet to move with your opponent's movement. So it is almost all footwork training.
But footwork in what way? Like stepping or in balance or weight transfer?
It's like all three. You're trying to keep your balance as best you can while keeping the connection and trying to move your feet like as effectively as possible. Because even in Ukemi, you still have Irimi, Tenkang, Tenchin, that basic footwork is there. Except you're doing all this footwork while you're in a semi-compromised position. You're being unbalanced. And then you have to do all this stuff while unbalanced.
Is there a connection, having a connection, maintaining a connection, does it have a martial component to it beyond learning how to do the technique or receive the technique? Is there like a martial value to the connection? I mean, I can see maybe from the nage having to stay in connection with the uke, but is there a martial component to when you say like maintain the connection? Because
the thing is, martial arts is about timing and spacing. Right, so being able to keep the connection means you can maintain a certain spacing.
Right,
and that when the person moves you don't just let yourself be debased and pulled off balance.
Yeah,
you learn how to move with it while still maintaining the spacing. And if you can maintain the balance, the proper spacing, you can counter or strike.
Yes,
but like if you think about what you were saying about. The ashisabaki, the footwork, do you think that's more important than body movement? Than taisabaki?
To me, taisabaki is based on the footwork. If your feet don't move, then your body doesn't move. Like for Tenkan, if you step back weakly, in a weak way or in like a half-hearted way, then the way your center turns with your body is also, there's no energy in that like, I like to think of it like torque. Like your leg is like the outside lever. When you turn it, then your center, when it turns, it could turn really, it's like using a wrench to like turn like a really, like to tighten like a bolt. So if the more effective your feet move, the more effective this torque that you have in your hip turns. Then when you can extend from your hip to your arms, then, when you turn, you're going to have the same amount of, power in this big circle,
There is structure to Tai Sabaki. I mean, in Aikido, there are some basic elements of footwork. I mean,
there's basic footwork, but I wouldn't say that there's a codified method of this is how your body moves. Like your shoulders are always here, your back is always there.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's hard to say. It's not really like the Tai Sabaki is like you have to move in a way that you could create the counter, but not so much where you're resisting the movement.
Yeah.
So I mean, if that was your question, like I don't know if there's a way to codify it based outside of within the technique.
Well, what I was thinking about, Sensei, was that, I know you've taught this before. When you're the nage, like there are like three main Aikido like nage movements, and then Ukemi, if you're maintaining the connection, is understanding at least those three basic movements. I mean, does that make sense or not?
Yeah, but I don't know if you could think about it from like your Tai Sabaki is about Irimi, Tenkan, and Tenshin, right? Like those are just the outcomes, right? Like they're not really.
I mean, like I think they're closely related. I mean, they're all overlapping. Like if your footwork is bad, then the way your body moves will be like weak. If you step forward weakly, then you'll never be able to throw your opponent down, or you never learn how to generate the power in your center to make a strong attack or a strong throw.
But I think I'm not sure. Were you asking like, is there an outline where your body has to be this way? I mean, other than based on the sword.
I mean, are you talking about like posture, and then like balance?
What I was thinking, and I think you're trying to get at this is, if in your Ukemi, if you understand what the basic movements that a technique will do, whether it's a Rimi, Tenshin, or Tenkan, like you need to be able to move with those basic body movements.
I'm not sure because I think it's based on attack, right? Like if he's going to Tenkan or Tenshin or Irimi, based on your attack, you have to have your body a certain way. But you can't say that Tenkan, Tenshin, or Irimi, your body is always this way. I think it's based on more on the attack, right? Like you attack Shomanuchi is different than how you would attack for like ski, perhaps. And the person,
you mean in the terms of like Ukemi?
Yeah. Like there's no outline, right? Like you can't say, here are the things you have to be doing.
Like I was taught just to move my feet. Move your feet, move your feet. You move your feet to like strike. You move your feet for Yokomanuchi. You step forward strongly to like grab, because later on you're attacking with your center to like upset their center,
Oh, so what you're saying is that.
Is that what you mean?
No, I think what I think he was saying is that like if the person understands Tenkan, Tenshin, or Irimi, right? That's how they know how to use their body. But I don't think we look at it from that point.
As a foundation. But I think, it was a question. It wasn't a statement.
But it's more codified based on the attack. How you take Ukemi is based on how you attack.
Or how you take Ukemi is based on the technique?
Like if you're going to Tenshin step back, how I take the Ukemi for Shomanuchi is different than how I take the Ukemi from Yokomanuchi. It's based on the attack.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's based on attack, but I mean, for me, you almost have to instinctively move your feet, like you have to just not go with the flow, but you have to instinctively move and react appropriately to the way they're moving. So it's almost there's no like codified way, but there is a codified way. Like you're supposed to, like for Yokonuchi Shonage, the way you step side, you're supposed to move your feet in a way that your center line is always, when he turns me to the side, he turned me to the side, but also my center line is protected from the Nage's counterattack or whatever. So all he can do is Shionage, kotegaishi, like he can't just break my arm.
But I mean, the thing is that every attack is generating power in a different way, right? A ski versus a grab versus yokominuchi, shominuchi, they're generating power in different ways. So then when you are receiving the technique and the person 10 shins, you're going to have different body positions until your body corrects, right? Because if you go yokominuchi, it's coming from the side.
Yeah.
Shominuchi is coming from the center. The grabbing is kind of a lower. So then the posture for, well, I guess posture would be, the posture for the ukemi would be different. So it's based on the attack.
I don't know, like for me, like every time, everything looks so all the techniques look so, all the attacks look so contrived in Aikido. Like to me, I thought like, oh my God, like no one's going to grab you like that. Then I realized, oh, they're like they're attacking forward with their center. So you grab with your center, you punch with your center, you like do yokonuchi with your center. So everything, well, basically you attack with your whole body. Is that what you're asking?
No, kind of. I mean, it's just saying like, because, yokominuchi is coming from the side,
Yeah.
and you're stepping outward. Shominuchi is coming forward. Grabbing is coming kind of under.
Yeah.
Punching is kind of under. Then that kind of whatever you're doing, whatever attack you're doing, dictates the ukemi posture.
Yeah, I would say there's like small differences, but I know that there's a basic core skill that all these attacks have, and that's moving forward strongly and effectively, moving forward and then grabbing. And even when you're attacking, you have to establish the connection with your with the nage.
So I think that's what you're asking, is that then everything must come from the center, is what you're saying.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Your movement. Yeah. Like Sensei told me a super interesting story about Osawa Sensei, the older Osawa Sensei, Kisaburo Sensei. He said, Osawa Kisaburo Sensei, he would, when he took you katatori, he would grab super lightly, and then he said, you could feel the power go out of your legs. And I'm like, wait, what? He would grab you and have such connection with you that he would somehow grab you and like drain the power from your legs. Like, what? To me, that just makes zero sense. And then as I train, I'm like, you know what? I have to learn how to do that. Because, you grab somebody and they don't catch your spacing and timing, they're gonna be like, they won't be able to move. You know what I mean? That would be an awesome skill to have.
Well, I mean, you hear all these crazy stories about like that. Supposedly, I know an Aikido teacher who I don't even know if teaches Aikido anymore, that Chiba Sensei came up and touched his shoulder and blew out his ankle.
I heard that story too.
And then he had, from right there, he like fell to the ground and then had to go to the emergency room and his ankle was shattered. And then he had to have reconstructive ankle surgery. And he said the only thing that Chiba Sensei did was touch him on the shoulder.
Like touch him lightly?
He didn't say lightly. He just said he put his hand on my shoulder and I felt this pain in my ankle, and then I had to go to the hospital, and then my ankle's broken.
Yeah, like I heard that story too.
So you go, whoa.
And you're like, whoa.
But I heard this firsthand from someone.
Like the guy that it happened to?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
So, I mean, it's not like I heard it from a guy. I heard it from a guy who heard it from a guy. I heard it from a guy who said that's what, and then he did not like Chiba after that.
Well, I would not like him either. But no, I would be, actually, if he did that to me, I would like to learn that.
After you came
back.
Teach me that. after you came back from surgery, you're like, hey, teach me how to do that thing.
Yeah. But then, you have a bad leg, so you can't practice that well, so you'll never learn it. But yeah.
So when you're taking the class, you're a student in the class, and either of you are teaching the class, and there's a person taking your ukemi. How does the student in the class, like you're saying, you love to learn this technique, but what does most students look at when they see a demonstration, if they see it? And then, what would be the optimal way to see a demonstration? Because it sounds like there's multiple things going on. You've got the technique being done by the teacher and the nage. You've got the person receiving it, but it's all happening at the same time. How does the student break that down or learn to break that down?
I don't know. Is it kind of based on your level?
I believe it's based on your level, but it's based on your ability to observe, because most people can observe one thing and then everything else is gone. But I think what you're trying to learn as a martial artist is to look at everything and go, okay, I got it. Kind of thing. But that is super hard to do. You have to conscientiously train and develop your eye. And when sensei or me or someone else is doing the movement, you have to look at both uke and nage and go, okay, that, you know.
So I guess it's a question for both of you. If, having done this for a very, very long time and been teachers for a very, very long time, the student's trying to learn, what does Ukemi teach to the student who's, especially the earlier level students? What does Ukemi teach? We kind of talked this a little bit in the beginning about how to receive the technique, how to be safe, but what do both of you think Ukemi teaches?
I mean, for me, Ukemi teaches you, like you said, like the basics of self-defense and connection, footwork. But mainly what it teaches you is the Aikido technique. Because if you know how to go with the flow with the technique, you can feel the technique. And then once you feel a technique, there's hope that you can replicate it. Because it's different than just watching a technique and just doing it. But let's say like sensei threw you, you'd be like, that's how you're supposed to do that throw. And then you spend all your time trying to replicate that same feeling.
Sensei, I know you and I, it might have been an offline conversation we had, but we were talking about the psychology of Ukemi and the metaphor of Ukemi.
So, yeah, in addition to, spacing, body positioning, martial technique, how to use your center and all these things, taking Ukemi is a metaphor.
Yes.
So the thing that you're trying to learn, this whole thing, all these things are just distractions.
Right.
The thing that you're trying to learn, which you have to be taught or teach yourself, is nonviolence. You cannot be violent while you're taking Ukemi. You have to learn, uke, receive, right? Uke means to receive, right? You can't be violent while you're receiving. So you have to learn to let go and go with the flow. So Ukemi is just a metaphor for trying to understand sensei's this assertion of nonviolence, right? And this nonviolence is like an Indian principle called ahimsa, that you go, what does nonviolence mean? Oh, I don't step on bugs. Well, okay, I don't step on bugs, but really it's a mindset. And to take Ukemi, you have to have this openness to receive the movement and be thrown in a way that you go, what was that? And then you go back, and with your partner, and you're like, how do I do that? I got to recreate that sublime throw.
So, Sensei, the thing that came immediately in my mind as you were describing this is, which way does it flow, though? So if you're learning Ukemi, does the psychology create the physical manifestation, or by mimicking the physical actions, does that then teach you the psychological lesson?
Well, the mimicking the physical teaches you the mental, but it also can go the wrong way as well. It can create fear inside of you, and then you become a jerk, and all you do is beat people up on the mat because the thing that you saw, you did not see nonviolence, you saw fear.
Right.
And then that's why some of these people are rough, and the fear and aggression stems from this idea of being afraid.
So, fear of the technique of being thrown or fear of falling. That like basically any kind of fear.
That fear of the technique or falling falls on top of the innate fear that you already had inside of you that you brought into the dojo, and then some people that fear is a little bit too close to the surface. So when that fear touches that fear, it freaks you out, and then some people run away, but some people become jerks.
Yeah, I could understand that. Yeah, because there's Ukemi used to be super scary, and then you realize, if I move this way, then I'm protected. I move this way, I'm protected. He could throw me as hard as he wants to. I just roll.
Do you remember when you stopped being afraid of Ukemi?
Like when Sensei used to throw me for Ukemi all the time, I was frightened all the time. And then I guess right around the time where I learned how to read his movement and be in the right place at the right time, then it was like, you know what? He could throw me as hard as he wants to because I trusted him. Because Sensei could throw me as hard as he wanted, and if I was in the right place and my body was positioned correctly, I had no fear of being hurt, you know. He would have to intentionally break my arm to hurt me. But going full force or going Sensei full force, yeah, I had no fear. It was actually super duper nice. Yeah, it was like pleasant. But then, you know, I mean, pleasant in a way that I was in control of my movement. So, and then I trusted Sensei, you know, completely not to mess up or fall on top of me. Yeah, it was no problem. Yeah.
What about you? Do you remember when Ukemi ceased being
You know, it's interesting. I think what you're saying, Ken, that there's a trust element to it.
Yes.
But I would say that it was many years for me.
of being afraid or not being afraid?
No, of being afraid. And then getting to that place where one is, as he just said, trusting the person who's throwing you not to like crank you in a way that you can't protect yourself from, but also like gaining like the, I guess, competency in Ukemi so that for the most part you were safe. So I think that took a while. And I think I always had that double feeling that you mentioned, which was like the anxiety coming into class, knowing it's going to be a rough session. So yeah, I'd say it was several years.
You know, you're talking about before, like the Indian philosophy thing. Would non-resistance play into that? Like the fear of violence? Like
The fear of violence?
like how like you're talking about like people are afraid. Would that like resisting the movement, would that play into?
That is a form of violence.
The resisting something?
Resistance is a form of violence.
Okay.
So if you resist, you get tense. That's a form of resistance. That's your form of violence.
So that's like, it's kind of like a protest against I'm not going to move that way. You can't make me move that way. You can't like bend my arm that way.
Yeah. Any
Sensei,
form of resistance is violence.
Do you find that the inclination to resist, as you're saying, it's a fear response, that's almost like people's default is where they start from? And then
when someone grabs you, you instantly tense up.
Right.
Right. It's tense up and you're like, not on my watch.
So that's like another psychological lesson.
It's all another.
I see.
If they grab you and there's nothing to grab, they grab your hand and it's just like holding a wet noodle. That's a certain level of composure that you've established because you're not afraid.
Yeah, I remember for Sensei talked. Both of you, I'm sure, know this, but he used to talk about the empty jacket, like that you would grab and the person would.
Like Kano Sensei.
Yeah, it would have like
fighting an empty jacket.
Fighting an empty jacket.
No resistance, you know. Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's what it's supposed to be. That's the way all martial arts are supposed to be. Yeah. So, in a way, Ukemi teaches you what you're saying, like how through non-resistance, moving with the technique, you just like me, like I overcame that fear of like for me, I was stiff. Like Sensei would be like, you should move because I'm gonna snap you like a cracker. I'm like, what? You gonna snap like a cracker? You know, like you hear those words. It's different in a movie than in real life. You're like, what? And then afterwards, you try your best to move. Like, oh, I understand now. Non-resistance is just like going with the flow or whatever new agey like.
But that's
phrase.
If you could be like fighting a wet jacket, that's a certain level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then to be able to, and the jacket falls down any way you throw it down,
Mm-hmm.
Right?
You know, and so I mean that's kind of a cool metaphor for Ukemi, but it's hard to be that way because inside of the Ukemi there's some place where there's fear.
Yeah.
And then unless you can totally let it go or totally seal yourself off from it, it's going to come up. And then it comes up in the middle. And that's why the most dangerous place is in the middle of the technique. When the you're in the middle of the throw, and then you go, and then
absolutely correct.
You stop rolling and then your face plant on the ground.
Yeah. Most mistakes happen in the middle of the technique. And then when they throw you, you're out of position.
Yeah.
Then take a bad fall, boom. broken face, broken shoulder.
Yeah, and if you can't follow the movement, that's resistance. If you can't keep the connection, that's a form of resistance, right? So like that's the thing you're trying to learn in the ukemi is how to follow the nage's movements, not from a subservient place, but in this place where it keeps you safe.
Yes.
And then, it comes to this idea that most martial arts are about learning how to destroy others.
Yeah.
But in Aikido, you're learning how to survive. And you learn how to survive by keeping the connection, keeping close to them, and then taking the ukemi when the moment is right.
So, like, I was thinking about this for a long time, and I was thinking about ukemi. Like, that's why we don't have competitions. Because how you say, like, competition is always like me against you. I'm going to stop what you're doing to me. That's what you say is like a form of violence. So you're always like at odds. And you learn like how not to give up, but that's about it. Like you don't really get the benefit of the philosophy of Aikido, which is, non-violence, non-resistance.
And, and then just learning to let go of certain things that you hold on to, which is, you have to, I don't know about you, but I got to this place in my own ukemi that I go, there's nothing they can do that can hurt me because I can take all the break falls. I know the exact perfect positions for shihonage koregaishi that you get there first. There's nothing they can do.
Yeah, you get there first.
And then, but then that you gain a certain confidence in your body when that happens. You're, I don't know about you, but I don't really ever think about, I hope I don't fall down. Like as you get older, you're like, I don't want to fall down. I go, I don't ever think about like, I hope I don't fall. I go, I should be able to handle it.
Oh yeah. Like, you know what? I have fallen down a bunch of times in stupid ways. And I'm thinking, thank God I do Aikido. I fell downstairs one time. I was like, I got up. Oh, what? I'm okay. Completely ridiculous. I just had a thought, like all these things that you said Ukemi teaches us, non-resistance, non-violence, instinctively following the movement, keeping connection. Like these are all lessons that are translated when you're the nage.
I think going back to something you said at the very beginning of the podcast, I think it's one of the reasons why so much of Aikido is misinterpreted.
Well, yeah, because you have to have a certain level of sophistication or knowledge to kind of understand this idea that, like Sensei said, you have never seen my real Aikido or something like that. Perhaps we have never seen his real Aikido because what we're talking about is his ability to take Ukemi, right? Because the Ukemi is the thing that if you really want to get good at Aikido, you get good at the Ukemi.
Yes.
But if you're a person who's going to resist the Ukemi, you're never going to get good at Aikido.
Yeah. You can get good at being stiff, and everybody is excellent at being stiff. You come to Aikido, you mastered stiffness.
To have these psychological insights and to get to that point is the mastery of Aikido. The mastery of Ukemi and Aikido necessary to do Aikido.
I think so.
I would say is essential because no good Ukemi, you don't have a good practice.
Yeah, and then as you get older, your joints become stiffer and weaker. So the poor Ukemi causes you to be injured more often. Yeah. So, it's essential to take to mastering Aikido because if not, you're just going to be injured all the time.
Yeah. And, Ukemi is not just falling, the actual falling. It's like Sensei said, everything in between the attack and the fall, that part, that really dangerous part in the middle where if you mess up, that's the important part.
Yeah.
That's the important part. Falling and attacking, they're both very, 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 very important things. But the stuff in the middle, that's super important too. That's where you learn everything.
If you think about all judo, aikido, jiu-jitsu, and all that stuff, most of the techniques go with the movements of the body already.
Yes.
Right. The elbow bends a certain way, it just gets trapped. But if you just try to wiggle out any old way, it's very easy to get injured.
Yes.
So, that's why it's essential that you learn the Ukemi so that you know where the proper place to be at the proper time, doing the proper thing.
And that's a secret. And that's the purpose of all martial arts, to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing.
And then all you need is one punch, one kick, one throw, and it's over.
Yes, over.
But if you don't, you're just going to go any old way doing 10,000 different techniques at once.
and then you don't know if you picked the right one.
Yeah.
Is there sort of a parting thought that both of you have about your experience with Ukemi and being senior teachers of Ukemi? Like if someone's like sat through this for an hour, we talked about the psychological components, as you just said, being at the right place at the right time, doing the right activity. Is there some essence of Aikido that we can distill of Ukemi and Aikido that we can distill for the people listening?
I don't know. Benjamin Franklin said, "Well begun is half done." Right. So if you learn the Ukemi, you should be able to be successful in both sides of the technique. But it's really hard because how many teachers really know the proper Ukemi? Where's your foot supposed to be? Where's your body? What position is your body supposed to be in? Here are the different levels of fall. Here's a beginner's fall. Here's an intermediate. Here's advanced. And then you got to teach all three, and the person should, by black belt, know all three. A beginner's one, an intermediate one, and an advanced one. But if you don't, like, you're putting your life into the nage's hands, hoping that the nage is a nice person, is calm and composed and not insane, and isn't going to try to hurt you.
Yeah, your Ukemi will save you.
Yeah, the Ukemi will save you if that's the case. You know, like Furuya Sensei one time was taking Ukemi for Chiba Sensei and for Nikkyo, and then he said he looked up. He said Chiba Sensei's eyes. The look on his face changed, and the look in his eyes changed.
Yeah.
And then he broke Furuya Sensei's wrist.
I remember that story. He said, Furuya's mistake was he stiffened up a little bit. He stiffened up, and then he said, Chiba Sensei looked at him, crack! Just because he got scared, and like that thing you're talking about, violence. Well, Furuya Sensei committed violence, and violence in turn, begot more violence. So Sensei got his arm cracked because he went like this a little bit. He winced a little bit. And a lot of people, when you do that, they don't like that. Because when you show fear, that means, it's not a martial artist. You know, you're supposed to fearlessly take the Ukemi and not get hurt.
So we've covered the psychological elements, the metaphorical message, physical placement, how to try to learn doing this during a technique. Is there any essence that either of you can pull together to distill what is the most important thing about Ukemi in Aikido?
I don't know. For me, the most important thing is that it's, doing it correctly saves you. And so you have to investigate and research and work on how to make it as perfect as possible. And then the Ukemi will save you in the end.
Yeah, then for me, like if you're a good uke, you can draw out the energy and correct technique from your partner. So if Ukemi is really good, it'll improve your partner's throw. And it'll bring out the correct technique. So if you move correctly, even though they're doing it wrong, the technique will feel correct to them. Like that's how much control you have as an uke when you know the technique like inside and out. You can you position yourself to make the technique work for them, for a beginner. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Thank you for watching or listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.